Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. No power and life-threatening cold. That's what millions of Americans are facing after a massive winter storm. And now there's even more danger. And what is it? And how are officials scrambling to keep it from getting worse? Caitlin Burke has more.
Extreme cold poses a new threat to residents in the South as millions are without electricity and the region's power grid is at risk of failing.
The next few days are going to be very tough. To those who have lost power, I know you are frustrated. I know you're miserable. I know you're uncomfortable. I know it is very miserable in this cold without heat.
Those who haven't lost power are being asked to conserve their energy, and power officials in Texas and 14 other states using controlled rolling blackouts in an effort to save the grid, something that's never happened before.
It's cold, kids around, trying to stay warm, fireplace, there's no firewood anywhere, no stores open.
Officials say new generation power sources like wind turbines have completely frozen over and been taken offline. And even more traditional power generation methods have started to fail in the ultra-cold temperatures. Meanwhile, all of this is playing out in the middle of a pandemic, and vaccine storage facilities are also losing power.
The vaccine had reached a temperature that it needed to be distributed and in arms within 12 hours. We began immediately upon notification, mounting a vaccine campaign unexpectedly because we're in the middle of a disaster.
Travel conditions also remain a problem, as many areas have solid layers of ice coating roadways. In Tennessee, this pickup truck pulls out of a driveway and then slides sideways down the street. In Mississippi, at least 5 18-wheelers involved in this pileup. And in Texas, a man standing by this SUV barely escaped after a second car came flying down an embankment. Overnight, a tornado generated by the winter storm destroyed homes in a North Carolina town, killing at least 3 people. As of this morning, more than 70% of the continental U.S. is covered in snow, and weather officials say more than 50 million people could see temperatures dip below zero over the next several days. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Isn't it amazing? We've been fighting global warming. You've heard about global warming. I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, like it or not, about every 50 years, 50,000 years, 20,000 years or so, you have an ice age, and we're coming up on one of them, and those climate alarmists don't like it. But I believe what ought to be done is to take Joe Manchin from West Virginia and see if he'd switch to being a Republican, let him be in charge of the Energy Committee, and then begin to say, we've got to have some coal, we've got to have natural gas, we've got to have some oil, because those wind farms aren't going to work. And some of the other things that in the Green New Deal, which just won't be enough to keep us warm, because it's getting cold and it will continue to get colder. And global warming is not the threat that everybody makes it out to be. I'm just sorry, it just isn't. But man, it is cold. And I hope you can stay warm, and I pray for our dear friends in Texas and other places where they're lacking power. But we really have got to emphasize the fact if they shut off all the natural gas, they shut off all of the oil and the coal and so forth, we're not going to have enough fuel to keep this place, this country we've got warm in the cold weather that's coming, and there'll be plenty of it. Well, in other news, alarming variants of the coronavirus has everyone on edge. The big question, could they trigger a new surge in cases? Ephraim Graham has more.
Pat, as the number of new cases is dropping, there are fresh concerns mutations could lead to an increase. The South African variant, now in 8 states, is troubling because it appears vaccines aren't totally effective against it, and some patients have been reinfected.
In South Africa, there were people who got infected with the original virus, recovered, and then got reinfected with this new variant, the South African variant.
Researchers are now tracking 7 variants that started here in the U.S. Meanwhile, in California, the administration is opening the first federally managed mass vaccination site. And President Biden is traveling to Wisconsin today for a town hall to win support for his $1.9 trillion virus relief plan. A COVID-19 cover-up, that's what New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is accused of after his secretary admitted his administration withheld data on coronavirus nursing home deaths. The governor tried to put out the fire in a news conference yesterday. CBN's Jenna Browder has the story now from Washington.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is under mounting pressure to answer questions about his administration's handling of COVID-19 in nursing homes. But his explanation yesterday in his news conference only outraged lawmakers and families who lost loved ones.
I want to clarify facts on the nursing homes.
The governor telling cameras his administration was honest in its reporting of COVID nursing home deaths, but conceding.
I understand the public had many questions and concerns, and the press had many questions about nursing homes primarily. And I understand that they were not answered quickly enough.
Last week it was revealed 12,743 long-term patients died of the virus in New York, much higher than the state's official tally of 8,500. And in a phone call with New York State Democrats, Cuomo's secretary admitted that his office withheld data on the number of COVID nursing home deaths because they were afraid it would be used against them in a Justice Department investigation.
There is a toxic political environment, and everything gets politicized.
Last March, Cuomo issued a mandate allowing some 9,000 COVID-positive patients into nursing homes. Families want to know if their loved ones could have been saved.
Our seniors deserve justice, and that requires an independent investigation with subpoena power.
Fox News' Janice Dean lost both of her in-laws and has been speaking out about Cuomo for months.
He is a liar. He just continues to lie and deflect and blame everyone else.
She wants an independent, bipartisan investigation into Cuomo and his administration.
I am calling on every single lawmaker in Albany and also on the federal level. Do you not see what is happening right now? Do you not care about all of the people in New York State that want to find out why their loved ones died in nursing homes? He didn't follow the science. You don't put infected patients into nursing homes. That is the bottom line, Governor.
Calls for the governor to resign continue to grow, and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are taking action.
Today I'm calling upon the Department of Justice and Attorney General James to investigate Governor Cuomo and his administration from top to bottom.
Democratic Assemblywoman Alessandra Biaggi. To New Yorkers watching Cuomo's press conference, it is riddled with lies, theater, and deflection.
The truth is everybody did everything they could.
In addition to investigations, state Democrats have also discussed taking away the governor's emergency powers to deal with the pandemic. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Despite yesterday's news conference, still many unanswered questions. Pat?
The thing of it was, the Javits Center had plenty of beds. They didn't use them. President Trump sent a whole ship, a hospital ship from Norfolk all the way up to New York to accommodate patients. They didn't use them. I think Franklin Graham actually had a hospital available in Central Park. They didn't use it. They didn't need to put those nursing home people into this infected environments, but they did. And the governor's trying to cover it up. It's just shocking, absolutely horrifying. And he's trying to, make a movie and be a star and all this kind of stuff. It's just shocking what's happening. They were committing people to death. You can't put a sick nursing home person into an infected environment, and then when they die, then you cover up the fact of how many people died. I mean, it's appalling. Well, it's not just New York. It's amazing. The two of the bluest states, California and New York, they were thought, well, they're safe forever for the Democrats. Not anymore. Because in California, there's been an unbelievable surge of interest in a recall movement about Governor Gavin Newsom. And they have enough signatures, they want to make sure they get another 500,000 more, so there's no question when they're checked out. But they have 1.5 million now. They need another. They've got another 500,000 they want to get to make sure everything is set. But you're looking at California and New York, and if these states go, I really believe we're going to see a sea change in the leadership of our nation. But Ephraim, you can tell us more about what's happening in California.
Pat, leaders of a movement called Recall California, Governor Gavin Newsom, say they do have enough signatures, as you said, to force a special statewide election. Recall Newsom 2020 announced it's gathered 1.5 million signatures needed and is now working to get up to 500,000 more before the March deadline. Recall leaders cite Newsom's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has included strict statewide lockdowns on businesses and even churches. The election must take place 60 to 80 days after the signatures are verified. Microsoft says a foreign power enlisted more than 1,000 software engineers to pull off a massive computer hack against U.S. government agencies. It came through infected software from a company called SolarWinds in Austin, Texas. The software provides network monitoring services to the White House, the Pentagon, and the Departments of Treasury, Justice, and Commerce. The breach was so dire, the Pentagon ordered an emergency shutdown of the internal network that handles classified material. It's considered the largest and most sophisticated attack the world has ever seen. Turning now overseas, widespread protests continue to roil the Southeast Asian nation of Myanmar 3 weeks after a military coup. Now security forces are intensifying their crackdown against those demanding a return to civilian rule. George Thomas has the latest on the escalating crisis.
Myanmar's military, armed with a new security law, are warning protesters that any attempts to subvert their power could land them in prison for more than 20 years. Across this country, thousands are defying the new law and heightened security measures, hitting the streets to demand the release of detained civilian leaders. Among them, ousted leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi. She won in November elections, but then the military took over, claiming voter fraud.
We voted our government fairly and righteously. But this unfairness is ruling over the righteous, and it makes me and all of us, the civilians, sad and angry.
Lines of military vehicles have taken up positions around Myanmar's largest city, Yangon, as coup leaders urge protesters to return to work.
The number of protesters reduced yesterday, so the military took advantage of that and brought military vehicles onto the streets to intimidate the people.
The military also wants sweeping power to access user data, block websites, order internet shutdowns, and imprison critics. More than 400 people have already been arrested since the February 1st coup.
Ongoing arrests of political leaders, government officials, civil society actors, and media representatives are deeply concerning, as are the restrictions on the internet and communication services.
The United States has condemned the coup and last Friday imposed sanctions on the military chief and his generals. A prominent Christian leader has told CBN's Asia correspondent Lucille Talusan that Myanmar needs prayer.
Pray for Myanmar, pray for people of Myanmar to have that kind of mentality that we all are one family. Pray for it so that we have peace and reconciliation in our country.
George Thomas, CBN News.
And unfortunately, the crisis is only escalating. Pat?
This should not be allowed to stand. We just can't have military groups taking over. And that woman, Kyi, who was freely elected, was a champion for human rights, and we need to stand with her. But, you know, that's the famous Kipling, you know, on the road to Mandalay where the flying fishes play and the sun comes out like Burma, like thunder across the bay. You know, Rangoon, and it's now has a different name, but it was fabled that it's a beautiful country. And again, you just hate to see these vicious people take over. When you think of the killing fields that took place in Asia, there's a savagery that lies underneath that peaceful exterior that comes out from time to time, and it's just shocking. But the weight of the United Nations, the nations of the world should just stand against that and not allow a civilian takeover of a governor. Peaceful, transition to power to be thwarted by a group of colonels, generals, whatever they are, and to put in military rule. But that's just one more example. We can't let that kind of stuff stand, because it'll be like a cancer, and little by little it'll come back to haunt us all.